Now I look at that and I see a woman basically at my own age, and I've grown up in a world where the worst that ever happens to me is I lose an election. She's grown up in a world where you lose your life if you get it wrong, and both your families come from that background. To what extent do you think that completely changes your approach to just how you live your life on a day-to-day basis? Do you feel it's more precious to hold on to? Do you ever feel a sense of threat because you've grown up around people who've had to live with that?
I think it gives you a sense of freedom, almost. The gravity of it can almost be liberating. There is so much about what of that heritage, though, constitutes something that becomes a part of you, something that you choose to make a part of you, you know, that which is escapable or inescapable. And she spoke in the interview there about constituting her memory around truth, around remembrance. And I think one of the really fascinating things in the book is that towards the end we start to get away from this idea that memory's only partner is forgetting, and introduce this kind of third category of invention. And I think, I mean, particularly for me, growing up here, being brought up here, essentially being, you know, British, hearing so much romance, so much passion about Iraq, about what it was, yet only having access other than through vernacular to what we see now, this total void of a nation tearing itself apart. It becomes necessary to start supplementing that understanding of what the country is with some kind of romanticized view, as Haifa does towards the end, where she's in London. She starts with her partner. She starts she starts inventing these bits, you know, these posters of Iraq, you know, places she's never seen, that she adds to her collective memory just to sustain her.
And Fatima, would you agree with Sami there that it can almost give you a sense of freedom, or have you felt anger and rage about the way your life has been impacted by these political events?
No, I agree with Sami totally. I think it is liberating. It also, when you grow up with that kind of very heavy baggage, as it were, around you, with ghosts, with these pictures that become how you know a country or how you know a language or a people, you do feel that imagination is a great connector to these things that maybe otherwise you wouldn't be allowed to see. But also, I think, I always felt that I was one of thousands. I never felt that it was just something that happened to Pakistanis, or that that happened to people in my family. And what is remarkable about Haifa's book is, even though, as you said, it's a short collection of stories, of remembrances, we get from Dreaming of Baghdad some idea of what happened around her, to her family, to her father's family in a Kurdish village, to her people who can't speak their own language freely, to women imprisoned.
And when you read about her perspective on Britain, certainly when she's sitting on the bus and it's cold, it seems the perfect answer to all those people who say, oh, refugees are just coming here to exploit us. Being a refugee, being driven away, dropped into an alien environment. I mean, I felt really sad, thinking, here's a young woman, she'll be having a great time.
Yeah.
Here she is living in fairly grim conditions in London, and completely cut off in that sense.
Well, exile is a totally disconnected experience, and I think whenever people in the West hear of dangers in other parts of the world, their immediate answer, their immediate solution is, well, why don't you leave? And I think they imagine that once you're out of that place, your life begins, but it ends in a certain way, because Haifa's life, which is so fraught with danger and love and pain, is now turned into, will the bus come on time? Will she get to work in time? She's got a cold. And the people who sustain you in these dangerous environments, the people who become not just companions but comrades and inspirations, disappear, and you become a number in the crowd.
I mean, Sami, the interesting thing is that your father chose as his wife someone who'd also been subject to, coming from a country constantly at war, in upheaval, pogroms, near genocide, out of Ireland. Does your mother give you, and her background, give you a perspective on anything in this book, or anything on the refugee experience?
Again, it's fragments. It's memories of childhood, being dragged out of bed in the morning by you know, the British, to the inability to be able to go anywhere else. You know, America was the dream, but not necessarily possible. So the idea that refugees can just resettle wherever they want, and then just being subject to decades of racial abuse, you know, in this country.
Did you ever get any of that abuse because you're half Irish, or didn't people register that? They're too busy abusing you because you're half Iraqi?
Depended on where I lived. I moved around quite a bit. Ironically, living in Wales, I was abused for being English. But no, it's never really been an issue. But then again, I suppose, to all intents and purposes, to all appearances, you know, there's this element of passing, and of necessarily absorbing the culture in which we're immersed.
I only really understood the Irish experience in one very revealing moment. When I first visited Northern Ireland as guest of Gerry Adams, we were going around the Catholic ghetto, patrolled by troops, and when we were taken into a home, as children, you know, no bigger than this, heard my voice and heard it was English, they hid behind their parents. And it brought home to me in a way that nothing I ever wrote or read could do. I mean, just what we were doing there, you know. Here was children terrified because they heard an English accent, the same accent as the troops that went by and would casually shoot the family dog or something like that, just to show who was in charge. Perhaps my autobiography, I should junk all that I've written, just have a dozen basic memories that come out just like that. Then if you come to look at this, it almost leads you to hear that American justification that Iraq was so bad that it justified the invasion, it justified what we did. Do either of you share that view?
Not at all. I think one of the very powerful things about reading Dreaming of Baghdad is at the time that Haifa was being tortured in prisons around Iraq, including Abu Ghraib, America was funding and supporting Saddam Hussein's regime. And there's a wonderful line in there where she says, the message of this book is it should be clear that the Iraqi people didn't struggle for decades to replace one torturer with another torturer.
I remember when we were debating these things in the House of Commons at the first Gulf War, I was given information that when Saddam Hussein came to power, the British Security Service, MI6, gave him lists of Iraqi trade unionists so he could arrest them and kill them, in the same way that the CIA gave lists of Iraqi communists. Most probably, Paul Haifa may even have been on one of those lists that were given. And so this completely demolishes any suggestion, I think, that the West's intervention has done anything to make this better.
Forgetting can be a remarkably effective weapon, as I think is suggested here.